I was but a viscount forgotten by the courts when I found a disfigured young woman bound to an oak in my forest, and on the parchment at her feet, it read, "Let the Lord decide. My name is Edmund Hartwell, 32 years of age, and I had grown accustomed to solitude in these Yorkshire moors where my family's disgrace had exiled me. The morning mist clung to the ancient trees like ghostly fingers, and the golden autumn leaves carpeted the forest floor with their dying beauty when I made the discovery that would change everything. I had been walking the boundaries of my estate, as was my custom each dawn, when I heard it. A sound so faint I almost dismissed it as the wind through the branches. But there it was again, a soft whimper that seemed to come from the heart of the old oak grove. My boots crunched through the fallen leaves as I approached, and the sight that greeted me struck me like a physical blow. She was bound to the massive oak with rough rope, her wrists raw from struggling against her bonds. Her dress, once fine but now torn and muddied, suggested she was no common village girl. But it was her face that made my breath catch in my throat. Half of it bore the cruel marks of old burned scars, twisted flesh that spoke of unimaginable pain endured in childhood. Yet her eyes, those remarkable green eyes, blazed with a dignity that neither her circumstances nor her disfigurement could diminish. At her feet lay a piece of parchment, weighted down with a stone. I knelt and read the words that would haunt me. "Let the Lord decide." The handwriting was formal, official, bearing the seal I recognized as belonging to Sir Reginald Pemberton, the magistrate whose authority extended over these lands. My hands trembled as I looked up at the woman, understanding immediately the cruel judgment that had been passed upon her. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked from thirst but retaining a musical quality that surprised me. "If you mean to leave me here, at least grant me the mercy of water first." I was already working at the knots that bound her wrists, my fingers clumsy with urgency. "I mean no such thing," I told her firmly. What manner of beast would bind a woman to die in the forest like some pagan sacrifice? As the ropes fell away, she collapsed forward, and I caught her before she could hit the ground. She was lighter than I expected, her body weakened by what must have been hours or perhaps days of exposure to the elements. The autumn air carried the promise of frost, and I could feel her shivering against me. "Can you walk?" I asked gently, helping her to steady herself against the oak's massive trunk. She nodded, though I could see the effort it cost her. "I can manage, my lord. I ask only that you point me toward the nearest village. I'll trouble you no further." "Nonsense," I said, surprised by the vehemence in my own voice. "You'll come to Hartwell Manor. We'll see you fed and rested, and then we'll get to the bottom of this madness." She looked at me with those extraordinary eyes, and I saw something flicker in them. Hope, perhaps, or simply disbelief that kindness still existed in her world. "You don't understand, my lord. I am accused of witchcraft. To shelter me would bring you nothing but trouble." The word witchcraft hung between us like a curse, but I found myself unmoved by it. I had seen enough of the world to know that such accusations often served purposes that had nothing to do with actual evil. "Then we shall weather that trouble together," I said, offering her my arm for support. As we walked slowly through the forest toward my home, she told me her name, Cordelia Ashworth, daughter of a blacksmith who had died 3 years prior. The scars, she explained with a matter-of-fact tone that broke my heart, came from a forge fire when she was 12. A pot of molten iron had overturned, catching her face and shoulder before her father could pull her to safety. "The village children called me a monster after that," she said quietly as we paused for her to rest against a fallen log. "But my father never saw me differently. He said scars were just stories written on our skin, and mine told a tale of survival." I found myself studying her profile as she spoke, noting how the morning light caught the unmarked side of her face, revealing features of classical beauty. A straight nose, high cheekbones, lips that curved naturally upward as if designed for smiling. The contrast with her scarred side was stark, but there was something about the way she carried herself that made the disfigurement seem almost irrelevant. "Your father sounds like a wise man," I said softly. "He was," she replied, and I heard the weight of grief in her voice. "After he died, things became more difficult. People had tolerated me when he was alive, but alone." She trailed off, but I could imagine the rest. By the time we reached Hartwell Manor, the sun had burned away most of the morning mist, revealing my home in all its faded glory. The stone walls still stood strong, but the ivy had grown wild, and several of the mullioned windows needed repair. It was a far cry from the grand estates where I had spent my youth, but it was mine, and it was honest. My housekeeper, Mrs. Whitmore, met us at the door with barely concealed shock. She was a good woman who had stayed with my family through our fall from grace, but I could see her struggling to process the sight of Cordelia's scars and bedraggled appearance. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said firmly, "this is Miss Ashworth. She is our guest and is to be treated with every courtesy. Please prepare the blue chamber and see that she has everything she needs." The older woman's eyes darted between Cordelia and me, and I could practically hear her mind working. But she had served the Hartwell family too long to question my decisions openly. "Of course, my lord," she said with a curtsy. "Shall I have cook prepare a meal? Please. And send word to Dr. Morrison to attend Miss Ashworth at his earliest convenience." As Mrs. Whitmore bustled away, I turned to find Cordelia watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You needn't have done that," she said quietly. "I'm quite capable of tending my own wounds." "I'm sure you are," I replied. "But you are under my protection now, and I intend to see that protection means something." Something shifted in her expression then, a softening that made her seem younger, more vulnerable. "Why?" she asked simply. "You don't know me. You have no obligation to help me." I considered her question, surprised to find I didn't have a ready answer. Why had I cut her bonds without hesitation? Why was I bringing a woman accused of witchcraft into my home, risking whatever reputation I had left? Standing there in the entrance hall of Hartwell Manor, with the autumn light streaming through the windows and illuminating both the beauty and the scars of the woman before me, I found myself speaking a truth I hadn't even realized I felt. "Because," I said slowly, "sometimes we must choose between what is expected and what is right. And leaving you to die in that forest would have been neither right nor honorable, regardless of what accusations have been made against you." She studied my face for a long moment, those green eyes searching for deception or hidden motive. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded once, a gesture of acceptance that felt strangely like a pact between us. The days that followed her arrival passed like scenes from a dream I hadn't dared to have. Cordelia proved to be unlike any woman I had ever encountered, her mind sharp as a blade and her knowledge surprisingly vast. As she recovered her strength, I found myself drawn to the library where she spent most of her time, devouring books with the hunger of someone who had been denied such luxuries for too long. "You read Latin," I observed one afternoon, finding her bent over a treatise on herbal medicine that had belonged to my grandfather. She looked up, color rising in her unmarked cheek. "My father believed education was a gift no one could steal from you. The village priest taught me letters when I was young, before," she gestured vaguely at her scars, "before it became unseemly for a disfigured girl to spend time in scholarly pursuits." I settled into the chair across from her, noting how the afternoon light streaming through the mullioned windows caught the auburn highlights in her hair. "And what does that particular volume tell you?" Her eyes brightened with genuine enthusiasm. "Your grandfather was remarkably progressive. He writes here about willow bark for fever, which most physicians dismiss as peasant superstition. But I've seen it work countless times." She paused, then added more quietly, "That knowledge, I suspect, is part of what led to my current troubles." It was the first time she had spoken directly about the accusations against her, and I leaned forward with interest. "How so?" Cordelia closed the book carefully, her fingers tracing the worn leather binding. "People fear what they don't understand, my lord. When old Martha Crow's grandson recovered from the wasting sickness after I gave her herbs to brew into tea, she praised me throughout the village. But when the physician's own treatments failed to save the blacksmith's wife the following month, suddenly my success became evidence of dark dealings. I felt anger kindle in my chest at the injustice of it. So healing makes you a witch, but failing to heal makes you a physician." "Precisely." Her smile was bitter but not without humor. The irony was not lost on me, I assure you. Our conversations during those early days revealed the depth of the conspiracy against her. Lady Pemberton, the magistrate's wife, had apparently harbored resentment against Cordelia since childhood. Jealousy of her beauty before the fire, and later spite at her resilience afterward. When Dr. Harrison, the village physician, complained about losing patients to Cordelia's herbal remedies, Lady Pemberton saw her opportunity for revenge. She convinced her husband that I was corrupting the natural order, Cordelia explained one evening as we sat by the fire in the small parlor. A disfigured woman with knowledge beyond her station, healing people who should rightfully depend on their betters. It was too tempting a target. I watched the flames dance across her features, noting how the firelight softened her scars until they seemed almost like shadows. "And the trial by ordeal? Binding you to the oak." Her hands tightened slightly in her lap. "Sir Reginald's innovation. He claimed that if God meant for me to live, he would send someone to find me before I perished. If not," she shrugged, but I could see the lingering fear in her eyes. "Barbaric?" I muttered, surprised by the vehemence in my voice. "Perhaps," she said quietly. "But it led me to you, didn't it?" The words hung between us like a confession, and I felt something shift in the air of the small room. We had been dancing around the growing attraction between us for days, neither willing to acknowledge what was becoming increasingly obvious. She was a woman accused of witchcraft, scarred and socially outcast. I was a disgraced Viscount with barely enough influence to protect myself, let alone her. By any rational measure, we were perfectly unsuited for each other. And yet, when she looked at me with those remarkable green eyes, reason seemed a paltry thing indeed. Our quiet domesticity was shattered one morning when Mrs. Whitmore announced a visitor with barely concealed distress. "Sir Reginald Pemberton to see you, my lord. He's waiting in the entrance hall." Cordelia, who had been helping me review the estate accounts, went pale. "He's come for me," she whispered. "He'll find that I'm not so easily bullied," I said, rising from my chair. "Stay here." Sir Reginald was a corpulent man with small, calculating eyes and the soft hands of someone who had never done honest work. He stood in my entrance hall as if he owned it, his expensive clothes a stark contrast to the faded grandeur around him. Two of his men waited by the door, their hands resting meaningfully on their sword hilts. "Lord Hartwell," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I trust you are well." "Well enough," I replied coolly. "To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit, Sir Reginald?" His smile widened, showing teeth stained with wine. "I believe you have something that belongs to me, or rather, someone who was placed under my judgment by lawful authority. I'm afraid I don't take your meaning. Come now, my lord." The witch Cordelia Ashworth. She was sentenced to trial by divine judgment, and yet she appears to have found shelter under your roof. Surely a man of your standing understands the importance of supporting lawful authority. I felt my temper rising but kept my voice level. "I found a woman bound to a tree like an animal, left to die of exposure. Common decency demanded I offer aid." "Common decency?" Sir Reginald laughed, a sound like gravel in a barrel. "My lord, the woman stands accused of trafficking with dark forces. She has corrupted the natural order with her unnatural healing, led good Christians astray with her feminine wiles. The Church itself has declared her practices suspect." "Has it?" I asked mildly. "I'm surprised to hear Father Benedict has taken such a stance, considering he blessed the herbs she provided for his own rheumatism." Sir Reginald's face darkened slightly. "There are forces at work here that you don't understand, Hartwell. This woman is dangerous. She preys upon the fears and superstitions of simple folk, turning them against their rightful authorities. She must be stopped. And if I refuse to hand her over?" The magistrate's mask of civility finally slipped. "Then I'm afraid you'll find yourself in very difficult circumstances indeed. Your family's position is already precarious, is it not? It would be unfortunate if questions were raised about your own associations." The threat was clear enough. I was balanced on a knife's edge between obscurity and complete ruin, and we both knew it. One word from Sir Reginald in the right ears could see me stripped of my remaining lands and titles, branded as a supporter of witchcraft and sedition. But as I stood there facing his greedy eyes and calculating smile, I found that I didn't care. Some things were worth more than titles or lands or the good opinion of corrupt officials. Some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. "I believe this conversation is concluded," I said quietly. "Good day to you, Sir Reginald." His face flushed purple with rage. "You're making a grave mistake, Hartwell. The woman will face justice with or without your cooperation. And you." He stepped closer, his breath reeking of wine and decay. "You'll learn what it means to defy lawful authority." After he left, I found Cordelia in the library, standing by the window with her back to the door. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the windowsill. "You heard," I said. She turned to face me, and I was struck by the dignity in her bearing despite the fear I could see in her eyes. "I heard enough. You must let me go, my lord. I won't be the cause of your ruin." "That," I said firmly, stepping closer, "is not your decision to make, isn't it?" There were tears threatening in her voice now. "You've shown me more kindness than I've known in years. I won't repay it by destroying everything you have left." I reached out and gently touched her hand where it rested on the window ledge. "What if what I have left isn't worth preserving without you in it?" The words hung in the air between us like a bridge I had just burned, and I watched Cordelia's expression shift from surprise to something deeper, more complex. She studied my face as if trying to determine whether I truly meant what I had just confessed, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for her response. "Edmund," she said softly, using my given name for the first time. The sound of it on her lips sent warmth spreading through my chest. "You cannot mean that. You barely know me." "Don't I?" I moved closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of lavender that seemed to cling to her hair. "I know that you read Latin and Greek with the fluency of a scholar. I know that you tend injured birds you find in the garden and speak to them as if they were old friends. I know that you worry about Mrs. Whitmore's aching joints and slipped chamomile into her tea without telling her. I know that you've survived accusations that would have broken a lesser spirit, and yet you still speak of your accusers without true hatred in your voice. Tears gathered in her eyes, making them shine like emeralds in candlelight. And I know that you are the most honorable man I have ever met, which is precisely why I cannot allow you to sacrifice yourself for me. What if I told you it wasn't a sacrifice? I reached up to touch her face, my fingers barely grazing the unmarked side. What if I told you that these past weeks have been the happiest I've known in years? She leaned into my touch for just a moment before pulling away, her practical nature reasserting itself. Happiness is a luxury neither of us can afford right now, my lord. Sir Reginald meant every word of his threat. He has the power to destroy you completely. I wanted to argue, to sweep her into my arms and damn the consequences, but the sound of urgent footsteps in the corridor interrupted us. Mrs. Whitmore appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with exertion and worry. My lord, she panted. There are men in the village asking questions about Miss Ashworth. Tom the stable boy heard them in the tavern, offering coin for information about her whereabouts. Cordelia's face went pale. They're turning the people against me, or trying to. Not all of them, Mrs. Whitmore said quickly. Tom says young Mary Fenwick spoke up for you, reminded everyone how you helped her baby through the lung fever last winter. But there are those who... She trailed off, clearly reluctant to continue. Those who would sell information for the right price, I finished grimly. How long do we have? Hard to say, my lord, but Tom thinks they'll be here before nightfall. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but my mind was already working, calculating possibilities and contingencies. Mrs. Whitmore, have the stable master prepare my fastest horse. If they want a chase, we'll give them one. No, Cordelia said firmly. I won't run anymore. I'm tired of running. I turned to face her, seeing the resolve hardening in her features. Cordelia, you must be reasonable. If they take me, at least they'll leave you in peace. She straightened her shoulders, and I was reminded again of the quiet dignity that had first struck me in the forest. I've been thinking about this since Sir Reginald's visit. Perhaps it's time I faced these accusations properly, in the light of day where everyone can see. Absolutely not. The words came out more harshly than I intended. I won't let you walk back into that man's trap. It's not your choice to make, Edmund. Her voice was gentle but unyielding. I am not your responsibility. Aren't you? I stepped closer, my frustration boiling over into something rawer, more desperate, because I rather thought you had become exactly that. My responsibility, my heart. The confession hung between us like a challenge, and I saw her resolve waver for just a moment. But then she shook her head, tears spilling over onto her cheeks. Don't you see? That's precisely why I have to go. I won't be the reason you lose everything that matters. You are what matters. The words exploded from me with a force that surprised us both. My title, my lands, my standing in society. What good are any of them without someone to share them with? What good is honor if it means abandoning the woman I love? She stared at me, her lips parted in shock. I had said it now, the word that had been building in my chest for days without my even realizing it. Love. Not mere attraction or companionship or even desire, though all of those were present. Love, pure and simple and terrifying in its intensity. Before she could respond, the sound of horses approaching at speed reached us through the open window. I moved quickly to peer outside and saw what I had been dreading. Sir Reginald's men, at least a dozen of them, surrounding the manor house with the precision of a military operation. It seems the choice has been made for us, I said grimly, turning back to Cordelia and Mrs. Whitmore. They mean to take you by force. Cordelia moved to stand beside me at the window, her face composed despite the danger. Then let them come. I have nothing left to hide from. But I was already moving, my mind racing through possibilities. The manor house was old but built for defense in more turbulent times. The walls were thick stone, the windows narrow, and there were passages that dated back to the days when Hartwell ancestors had needed to move unseen during the Wars of the Roses. Mrs. Whitmore, I said quickly, take Miss Ashworth to the old chapel. You know the way through the servants' passages. Lock yourselves in and don't open the door for anyone but me. I won't hide like a criminal, Cordelia protested. You'll hide like a woman I intend to protect, I replied firmly. Please, Cordelia, give me a chance to end this properly. She searched my face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. What will you do? What I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to have a very frank conversation with Sir Reginald about the nature of justice in these lands. Before they could leave, I caught Cordelia's hand and pulled her close enough to press a brief, desperate kiss to her forehead. Whatever happens, remember that I chose this.
He chose you.
And I would choose you again, every time. Her eyes filled with tears again, but she managed a tremulous smile. I know. and that terrifies me more than any accusation of witchcraft ever could. As they disappeared into the passages, I straightened my coat and walked toward the entrance hall, my boots echoing on the stone floors. Through the windows, I could see Sir Reginald's men taking positions around the building, but they hadn't moved to actually breach the doors yet. That meant their leader wanted to maintain at least the pretense of legality. I opened the great doors and stepped out onto the stone steps, meeting Sir Reginald's gaze with what I hoped was calm confidence. He sat his horse like a man accustomed to being obeyed, his face flushed with triumph. "Lord Hartwell," he called out, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "I trust you've had time to reconsider our earlier conversation. I'm here to collect what is rightfully under my jurisdiction." "Are you indeed?" I replied, descending the steps slowly. "And under what authority do you surround a peer's residence with armed men?" "Under the authority of the Crown and the Church, both of which take a dim view of harboring suspected witches." He gestured to one of his men, who produced an official-looking document. "I have here a warrant for the arrest of Cordelia Ashworth, signed by the Regional Ecclesiastical Court." I examined the document he handed me, my lawyer's training serving me well even in these circumstances. The seal looked authentic enough, but something about the wording struck me as odd. Too convenient, too perfectly suited to Sir Reginald's immediate needs. "This is dated yesterday," I observed. "Justice moves swiftly when the danger is clear, does it? How remarkable that the ecclesiastical court was able to review evidence, hear testimony, and render judgment so quickly. One might almost think the verdict was predetermined." Sir Reginald's smile faltered slightly. "The evidence against the woman is overwhelming. Surely you don't dispute that?" "I dispute many things, Sir Reginald. I dispute your methods. I dispute your motives. And I most certainly dispute your authority to conduct armed raids on the homes of peers without proper cause." I handed the document back to him with deliberate disdain. "But most of all, I dispute your version of justice." The magistrate's face darkened at my words, but before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "Perhaps, Sir Reginald, you might explain to his lordship why that warrant bears a seal I've never seen before." We all turned to see Father Benedict approaching on foot, his simple brown robes contrasting sharply with the martial display around him. The elderly priest moved with the confident stride of a man who feared neither earthly authority nor accusations of impropriety. Behind him walked several villagers, including young Mary Fenwick and her husband, old Tom the carpenter, and Martha Crowe, whose grandson Cordelia had helped heal. Sir Reginald's composure cracked visibly. "Father Benedict, this is a matter of secular justice. Your presence is neither required nor appropriate." "Is it not?" The priest's weathered face showed mild curiosity. "How strange, considering that warrant claims ecclesiastical authority. As the senior cleric in this parish, I should think my opinion might carry some weight in determining its authenticity." I felt a surge of hope as I began to understand what was happening. Father Benedict had not come alone or unprepared. This was a carefully orchestrated intervention, and the priest's next words confirmed my suspicions. "You see, Sir Reginald, I took the liberty of sending a message to the ecclesiastical court yesterday evening, after hearing certain disturbing rumors about proceedings conducted without proper notification of local clergy. The response I received this morning was most illuminating." From within his robes, Father Benedict produced a letter bearing genuine ecclesiastical seals. "It seems the court has no record of any case against Cordelia Ashworth. In fact, they expressed considerable surprise that anyone would claim to speak for them in such matters without proper documentation and witness." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Sir Reginald's face cycle through several shades of purple as he struggled to maintain his position. His men began to shift uncomfortably in their saddles, clearly uncertain about the legitimacy of their mission. "Furthermore," Father Benedict continued calmly, "I've had the opportunity to speak with many of our parishioners about the young woman's activities in our community. Would you care to share your experiences, Mary?" Mary Fenwick stepped forward, her baby cradled in her arms, her voice clear and strong despite her obvious nervousness. "Miss Ashworth saved my son's life when the lung fever took him last winter. Dr. Harrison said there was nothing to be done, but she brought me herbs and showed me how to make a poultice that drew the poison from his chest. She asked for nothing in return, and she never spoke a word against God or church while she tended him." One by one, the villagers came forward with similar testimonies. Tom the carpenter spoke of how Cordelia had eased his wife's pain during her final illness with remedies that allowed her to die peacefully at home. Martha Crowe told again of her grandson's recovery, emphasizing how Cordelia had insisted the boy's healing came from God's grace working through natural remedies, not from any power of her own. "These are the actions of a Christian woman using God-given knowledge to help her neighbors," Father Benedict concluded. "If this is witchcraft, then every herb woman and midwife in England stands condemned." Sir Reginald was trapped, And we all knew it. The forged warrant, the lack of proper ecclesiastical authority, the testimony of respected villagers. His case was crumbling before our eyes. But a cornered animal is often at its most dangerous, and I could see desperation replacing calculation in his small eyes. "You're all fools," he snarled, his veneer of civility finally abandoning him entirely. "That woman is dangerous, I tell you. She corrupts the natural order, makes people think they can heal themselves instead of accepting their proper place. She gives hope where there should be resignation, and that makes her more threatening than any real which could ever be." The admission hung in the air like a confession, and I saw several of his own men exchange uncomfortable glances. But Sir Reginald had gone too far to retreat now. "No matter," he continued, wheeling his horse toward me. "I have other warrants, Hartwell, ones that concern your own activities. Harboring a fugitive, interfering with lawful authority, seditious behavior against the Crown's appointed representatives. By the time I'm finished with you, you'll have nothing left but the clothes on your back." Before I could respond to this new threat, another commotion arose from the direction of the main road. A small party of horsemen was approaching at speed, their leader carrying a banner that made my heart leap with recognition. It was the Royal Arms, but more importantly, I recognized the rider, Lord Chancellor Westbrook, an old friend of my father's who had maintained his position despite the political upheavals that had brought down my family. Sir Reginald's face went pale as he recognized the newcomer's significance. Whatever games he might play with local authority, he could not afford to challenge someone with direct connections to the court. Lord Chancellor Westbrook dismounted with the fluid grace of a much younger man, his keen gray eyes taking in the scene with obvious displeasure. "Sir Reginald," he said coolly, "how remarkable to find you here with so many armed men. One might almost think you were conducting military operations rather than pursuing legal proceedings." "My Lord Chancellor," Sir Reginald stammered, "I was merely executing a lawful warrant for the arrest of a dangerous criminal." "Were you indeed?" Westbrook examined the forged document with the eye of a man who had seen every form of legal chicanery imaginable. "How curious. This seal appears to have been applied with rather more enthusiasm than expertise. And the parchment seems remarkably fresh for something issued by an ecclesiastical court that moves notoriously slowly in such matters." He handed the document back with evident distaste. "Sir Reginald, I'm afraid I have some rather disturbing news. Certain irregularities in your administration have come to the attention of higher authorities. Questions about missing tax revenues, questionable land transfers, and the mysterious disappearance of funds intended for road maintenance." Sir Reginald's face went from pale to ashen. "My lord, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, and you'll have ample opportunity to do so in London before a proper court of inquiry." Westbrook gestured to his own men, who moved with quiet efficiency to surround the magistrate. "In the meantime, you are relieved of your duties pending investigation." The collapse of Sir Reginald's authority was swift and complete. His men, realizing which way the wind was blowing, made no attempt to resist as their former leader was taken into custody. Several of them actually seemed relieved to be free of his service. As the dust settled and the various parties began to disperse, Lord Chancellor Westbrook approached me with something approaching a smile. "Young Hartwell," he said warmly, "your father would be proud to see you standing up for justice, even when it cost you dearly." "Thank you, my lord. But how did you know to come here?" His smile widened into something genuinely amused. "Did you think Father Benedict's message went only to the ecclesiastical court? The good priest is more politically astute than his humble appearance suggests. When he described the situation here, I realized it presented an excellent opportunity to investigate certain suspicions we've harbored about Sir Reginald for some time." Before I could respond, I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Cordelia emerging from the manor house, Mrs. Whitmore at her side. She had clearly been watching from the windows and had seen enough to know the immediate danger had passed. But uncertainty still shadowed her features as she approached our group. Lord Chancellor Westbrook studied her with interest, taking in both her scars and her dignified bearing without apparent discomfort. "Miss Ashworth, I presume? Father Benedict has told me much about your work in this community. It seems we owe you a significant apology for the ordeal you've endured." Cordelia curtsied gracefully. "You owe me nothing, my lord. Justice has been served, and that is enough." "Nonsense," he replied briskly. "You've been grievously wronged by a corrupt official, and that reflects poorly on all of us who serve the crown. But I believe Lord Hartwell here has some more personal amends to make." He gave me a meaningful look, and I realized this was my moment, perhaps my only moment, to speak what was in my heart without the shadow of accusation and persecution hanging over us. I turned to face Cordelia fully, aware that we had an audience but no longer caring about the proprieties of the situation. "Cordelia," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I have a question to ask you, and I hope you'll forgive me for asking it in such public circumstances. She looked at me with those remarkable green eyes, and I saw understanding beginning to dawn in them. What question is that, Edmund? The question I had been carrying in my heart for weeks now seemed to catch in my throat as I looked into her eyes. Around us, I could sense the villagers and even Lord Chancellor Westbrook leaning in with curiosity, but their presence faded into insignificance compared to the woman standing before me. The question is this, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Cordelia's eyes widened with shock, her hand rising instinctively to touch the scarred side of her face, in a gesture I had come to recognize as her way of reminding herself of what she believed others saw when they looked at her. Edmund, she whispered, you cannot be serious. I am nobody, the daughter of a blacksmith, accused of witchcraft, scarred and— You are everything, I interrupted, stepping closer and gently taking her hand in both of mine. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever known. Your scars tell a story of survival and strength that humbles me. Your knowledge and compassion have brought healing to this community. Your dignity in the face of persecution has shown me what true nobility looks like. I don't care about bloodlines or social standing or what the world might think. I care about you, Cordelia Ashworth, and I am asking you to share your life with mine. Tears were flowing freely down her cheeks now, catching the afternoon light like crystals. But Edmund, what kind of life could I give you? What kind of wife could I be to a Viscount? The only kind I want, I said simply. The kind who challenges me to be better than I am. The kind who sees the world with clear eyes and an open heart. The kind who chooses compassion over convention and truth over comfort. Before she could voice another objection, Father Benedict stepped forward with a gentle smile. My child, he said to Cordelia, I have married many couples in my years of service, and I can tell you that the bonds that matter most are not forged by similar circumstances but by compatible souls. What I see between you two is a meeting of minds and hearts that happens perhaps once in a generation. Mary Fenwick spoke up from the gathered crowd, her voice warm with emotion. Miss Cordelia, you saved my baby's life. If Lord Hartwell can see what we all see in you, why can't you see it in yourself? One by one, the villagers added their voices to the chorus of support. Tom the carpenter spoke of her kindness to his dying wife. Martha Crowe praised her gentle way with children. Even some of Sir Reginald's former men, still present as they awaited new orders, nodded respectfully in her direction. Lord Chancellor Westbrook watched this display with obvious satisfaction. Miss Ashworth, he said finally, I have observed that the measure of a person's true worth often becomes clearest in times of adversity. Both you and Lord Hartwell have shown remarkable character under circumstances that would have broken lesser souls. If you'll permit an old man's advice, I would say that such a match is blessed by Providence itself. Cordelia looked around at all the faces watching her with expectation and support, then turned back to me. I could see the internal struggle playing out in her expression, hope warring with years of learned self-doubt, love fighting against ingrained beliefs about her own worthiness. You truly mean this, she said. Not quite a question but not quite a statement either. I have never meant anything more in my life, I replied. Cordelia, these past weeks have shown me what my life could be with you in it. I don't want to go back to the empty existence I had before. I want to build something real and meaningful with you. Something that honors both our struggles and our dreams. She was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes searching my face as if memorizing every detail. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear enough for everyone to hear. Yes, she said simply. Yes, Edmund, I will marry you. The cheer that went up from the assembled villagers was loud enough to startle the birds from the nearby trees. I found myself laughing as I swept Cordelia into my arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When I set her down, Father Benedict was already approaching with a broad smile. Well then, he said cheerfully, shall we discuss arrangements for the ceremony? I believe the community would be delighted to celebrate such a joyous occasion properly. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of preparations and revelations. Lord Chancellor Westbrook's investigation into Sir Reginald's corruption uncovered a network of fraud and abuse that reached far beyond our small corner of Yorkshire. The disgraced magistrate's illegal activities had actually put him deeply in debt to several powerful creditors, making him vulnerable to exactly the kind of pressure that had driven him to target Cordelia in the first place. More surprisingly, Westbrook's inquiries into my family's political troubles revealed that much of our disgrace had been engineered by the same corrupt network. New evidence came to light that exonerated my father's reputation and opened doors for the restoration of our family's standing at court. It seems, Westbrook told me one evening as we reviewed the legal documents, that virtue occasionally does receive its earthly reward after all. Your father would be vindicated to know that his principles, which cost him so dearly, have ultimately been proven correct. But more important than any restoration of political fortune was the transformation I witnessed in Cordelia as our wedding day approached. The fearful, defensive woman I had found bound to the oak gradually gave way to someone more confident, more willing to accept the love and respect of others. She began to carry herself differently, to speak with greater authority about her herbal knowledge, and to accept the genuine affection of the villagers who had come to see her as I did, not as a scarred outcast, but as a healer and a blessing to their community. Our wedding day dawned clear and bright, with that particular golden quality that October light possesses when the world seems poised between seasons. The ceremony took place in the small stone church that had served the Hartwell family for centuries, but the building could barely contain all who came to witness our union. As I watched Cordelia walk down the aisle toward me, dressed in a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Whitmore had spent weeks perfecting, I was struck by how radiant she looked. The morning light streaming through the stained glass windows seemed to illuminate her from within, and I realized that I no longer saw her scars as disfigurement but as part of the unique beauty that was entirely hers. Father Benedict performed the ceremony with obvious joy, his voice carrying clearly as he spoke of the bonds of love that transcend worldly concerns and the blessing of finding one's true companion in life. When the moment came to exchange vows, Cordelia's voice was steady and strong as she promised to love and honor me, and I heard in those words not just commitment but the courage to believe in her own worthiness of love. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the village had seen in years. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by dozens of families. Musicians played late into the evening, and even the most reserved villagers found themselves caught up in the general atmosphere of joy and hope. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Cordelia and I found ourselves alone in the garden of Hartwell Manor, walking among the late autumn flowers under a star-filled sky. The house glowed warmly behind us, windows lit with the promise of home and belonging. "Are you happy?" I asked, taking her hand as we paused beside the fountain that had been dry for years, but now bubbled with fresh water thanks to her patient work in clearing the old channels. She turned to face me, and in the moonlight I could see the contentment in her expression. "I never dared to dream I could be this happy," she said softly. "When I was bound to that tree, waiting to die, I thought my story was ending. But it was really just beginning, wasn't it?" "The best stories always are," I replied, pulling her close. "And ours, my love, has only just begun." As I held her there in the garden where we would spend the rest of our lives together, I reflected on the strange turns that had brought us to this moment. I had been a forgotten Viscount, living in exile from a world that no longer valued what I represented. She had been a woman marked by tragedy and persecution, convinced of her own unworthiness. Yet somehow, in finding each other, we had discovered that our individual broken pieces could form something whole and beautiful. The lesson seemed clear enough now, though it had taken love to teach it to me. Sometimes the most precious gifts come disguised as burdens, and sometimes the people we most need to meet are the ones society tells us to avoid. Courage is not the absence of fear but the decision to act rightly despite it, and true nobility has nothing to do with titles or bloodlines and everything to do with the content of one's character. I was no longer a Viscount forgotten by the courts. I was a man who had chosen love over convention, justice over comfort, and truth over convenience. And standing there in the moonlight with Cordelia in my arms, I knew that I had chosen well. If you've enjoyed this story of love conquering prejudice and courage triumphing over corruption, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more historical romances that celebrate the power of the human heart to overcome any obstacle, please consider subscribing to this channel for more inspiring stories that remind us why love, in all its forms, remains the greatest force for good in our world.